Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're on what feels like a high-stakes mission.
It really does.
We're not just reading history, we're trying to navigate, well, centuries of cultural debris, accumulated interpretations, and some pretty significant misinformation.
Yep.
All to find the pure message at the core of a spiritual tradition. You've sent us sources that basically demand we act like intellectual archaeologists.
That's absolutely the right mindset. Our objective today is to help you, the learner, extract the core principles.
The principles of consciousness, of guidance.
Exactly, what the tradition calls hidayat. And to do that, you have to critically separate the timeless wisdom from, I guess, the cultural fixations that have attached themselves like barnacles over time.
And we are jumping right into the deep end because the sources challenge even the most beloved phrases.
Oh, immediately.
Take this one, often attributed to Imam Jafar. Reason is the prophet within you.
Classic.
But our sources actually critique this. They suggest it could be slanderous against both God and the prophetic mission itself.
And what's fascinating there is the immediate demand for critical thinking, even towards something that sounds so positive, so well-meaning.
Right.
The critique argues, look, if human reason is already the prophet,
then what's the point?
what is the necessity for external divine revelation or for the actual prophets?
Yeah.
It suggests an assumption of human completeness that the tradition itself just fundamentally denies.
It sets the bar for us maybe a little too high, like we don't need any external course correction. But there's an even bigger historical bombshell in here.
I think I know which one you mean.
Something people assume is just core theology.
The political myth, yes. You often hear rulers, powerful figures, being described with this phrase, Dulullah fil ars.
God's shadow on earth.
Right. And it's always presented as this, profound, sacred mandate for their authority.
And it turns out it was nothing like that.
Not at all. The source reveals this concept was an invention. From the fire-worshipping Sasanian culture, it was a purely cynical, political power transfer agreement.
So, a deal.
A deal. The Sasanian kings basically told the chief priests, you legitimize us, call us God's shadow.
And we'll give you power.
And in return, we will transfer institutional authority to you.
So it was a quid pro quo, a clerical endorsement deal. And then it gets translated into Arabic by this scribe, Ibn Mukafa.
Who worked for the Sasanians and later for the early Islamic empires.
And that just, it profoundly shifts the context, doesn't it? What was adopted as divine theology was actually a political bargaining chip from a completely different religion.
It was institutional engineering, masquerading as a divine decree. And if even the most revered titles for human power are just temporary, corruptible inventions, it forces a question.
What's the only thing that is permanent?
What's the only thing that's real? And for that, we should probably bring in the science.
Let's do it.
We have to start with a universal truth from physics. Everything degrades.
Entropy.
Entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, the flow from order to disorder, the movement toward death. I mean, this isn't just theory, it's the reality of universal mortality. Even the proton, the dominant subatomic particle that defines all the elements, hydrogen, helium, you name it, even the proton has a predicted lifespan.
Wait, really? The actual foundation of matter is finite. That's immense.
It is. And this universal mortality is the root of the theological principle of finitude, what the tradition calls fen.
Everything is temporary.
Everything is mortal and temporary. The core principle is that only the essence of the Lord, what they call Baki, is eternal. And this impermanence is precisely why the sources so strongly critique fixating on the trivial things.
The thing's guaranteed to die and degrade anyway.
Exactly.
And this is where all the cultural obsessions come in. I mean, a fixation's so small, they just block out the giant principles.
Like what?
Well, the sources point to the absurdity of associating clothing colors, black, white, red, with heaven or hell, or viewing specific religious attire as some kind of mark of superiority.
This focus on just a surface level, it misses the entire point of existence. It lets triviality become a massive distraction.
And we read about some truly absurd superstitions that took hold.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that a sheikh can literally put his followers in a matchbox and then, empty them into paradise?
Or the commercialization of non-flammable shrouds you could buy for your grave.
Right. Or, my personal favorite, trying to establish if the milk or eggs you're eating came from a married animal coupling to ensure purity.
Checking the marital status of a chicken.
I have to admit that sounds like a truly exhausting theological quest.
It highlights a complete misplacement of focus. And the sources use the perfect image for this.
The matchstick analogy.
Yes, if you hold a matchstick right up to your eye,
You can't see the forest?
you obscure, or you might even burn the entire forest behind it.
We get so caught up in the matchstick, the superficial, sometimes ridiculous rule, that we miss the enormous living ecosystem of meaning and responsibility that the faith actually demands.
And this obsession leads to substituting genuine moral accountability with borrowed or misunderstood legalisms. The source brings up that strange anecdote about the monkeys.
The monkey stoning another monkey. How does that connect?
Well, the underlying critique is that this specific punishment, the stoning, was actually borrowed or sold, as the source puts it.
From where?
From ancient Jewish legal codes. And then it was misapplied to a new ethical system. The point is that human Homo sapiens' moral responsibility, which is driven by choice and consciousness, can't be equated with animal instinct or ancient borrowed laws.
You can't outsource your ethic.
You cannot outsource your ethics to a tribal custom or an animal anecdote if you have the capacity for real moral choice.
Okay, that brings us to the next critical question. If the superficial stuff is the matchstick and borrowed laws aren't the foundation, what's the forest? What are the scriptures actually pointing us towards?
They're pointing toward reality itself.
Not themselves.
No. The primary books are not bound in paper. They are the book of the universe, nature, the book of history, the book of humanity. The revealed text, the Quran, is presented as the auxiliary book. It just helps you read the primary ones.
Which is perfectly illustrated by the analogy of the finger and the moon.
Precisely. The verses, the ayat, their fingers, they are pointing toward reality. That's the moon. Nature, history, physics.
And the focus has to be on what the finger points to.
Absolutely. If you spend your whole life studying the texture and the color and the history of the finger, you betray the finger's entire purpose. You're missing the moon.
This allows the source to just fundamentally redefine the Quran itself. It's stated so explicitly.
What does it say?
The Quran is a book of consciousness and wisdom. A bilin hikmet kitaba. It is not a book of information, a bilgi kitaba.
It doesn't aim to make you knowledgeable.
No, it aims to make you wise.
And the evidence for that is baked right into the text itself. It doesn't give you ready-made answers. It tells you to travel the earth and examine how creation began.
Right.
It repeatedly asks you to look at the camel, look at the sky, look at historical ruins, to learn from nature, paleontology, archaeology directly, not from the text as if it's a science textbook.
Which is exactly why the source so strongly critiques the tendency to load the text.
Yes, the attempt to force modern scientific findings, quantum physics, cosmology, or even
the ridiculous stuff.
Right, like cell phones being present during Noah's flood,
Right.
to force all that into the scripture. It's just desperate and unnecessary.
I love the analogy they use for this. You put a burden on a honeybee, you expect honey from a donkey.
The Quran is the honeybee. It produces the most refined nourishment guidance, spiritual healing, shifa.
Right.
Loading it with the burden of being a physics or a history book, you only get husran, loss and disappointment. You degrade the text by making it carry a burden it wasn't designed for.
And if it's not a data archive, that explains the non-chronological stories.
Exactly.
If you look at the Shuar chapter, it's a perfect example. It mixes prophets like Moses, Abraham, Shuaib, all out of order.
And Moses and Shuaib were contemporaries. Abraham lived 1,000 years earlier. It's not a linear historical timeline.
Because that's not the point.
Because the narrative function is instructional, not archival. I mean, think about the 7 accounts of the Adam-Iblis story. They are not identical, and that's intentional. Each version highlights a different lesson. Adam's repentance in one, Satan's arrogance in another, Adam's superiority in a third. The measure of a history book is true or false. The measure of a scripture's narrative is its purpose, the lesson.
So when the scripture says it tells these stories bilhaq, with truth or justly, it's not claiming to be the literal corrected history.
No, not literal history. The source relies on Zamaishri's interpretation here. The bilhaq means with a sound and true purpose.
And the purpose is guidance.
Guidance, consciousness, establishing clear moral red lines. It's a spiritual navigation chart, not a data log.
This focus on purpose brings us to the core corruption that has plagued these traditions for centuries. The threat of arrogance, of false piety.
Rooted in the class divide.
Yes, this concept of the melee.
The full, overflowing elite. The Havas, or the chosen class, who separate themselves from the Evam, the general populace.
And the source reminds us this elite classification system, this Havas Avam thing, it isn't divine. It's rooted in ancient pagan systems.
Like ancient Egypt.
Exactly. Where knowledge was power, guarded by Pharaoh's priests, the elite believed their knowledge made them spiritually superior and entitled them to power.
And this classification breeds two completely opposing models of theology. On one side, you get the theology of arrogance, the Kibir Theologici.
Which is judged entirely by external markers, right?
Absolutely. Superiority is based on being in the in-group, performing excessive rituals like endless Hajj, or wearing specific religious markers, the robe, the turban.
So worship in that framework becomes like a washing machine.
A spiritual washing machine. The source gives that powerful example of the official who takes bribes.
Yeah.
And he sees the Hajj pilgrimage purely as a reset button. It washes away his transgression so he can start fresh.
So faith becomes a license to be immoral as long as you complete the external stuff.
Exactly. And you contrast that with the theology of piety, the Takva Theologici. Here, superiority is based only on Takva.
And Takva is defined as?
The consciousness of responsibility.
Alak.
And responsibility means upholding the rights of all creation, the river, the soil, the animal, humanity, yourself, and God. If your worship increases your arrogance, you are actively denying the core teaching.
Here's where the sources give us that powerful psychological insight that really stuck with me.
What's that?
That a superiority complex, Kibir, is actually a hidden inferiority complex.
Let that sink in for a moment.
It's huge.
The person who feels this burning, constant need to claim superiority based on clothes or knowledge or rituals is usually desperately trying to hide a fundamental feeling of worthlessness, of spiritual inadequacy that they can't admit, even to themselves. Their visible arrogance is just a defense mechanism.
And that completely reframes the dynamic between the prophets and the established elites. This arrogance is what blinded Noah's people and Hud's people. The elite, the Malay, they accuse the prophet of being in manifest error. They call him Sefihast, qualityless, stupid.
And that conviction, it isn't born of truth. It's born of the belief that God must, by definition, be on their side, the side of the comfortable, known elite.
And this certainty, this total lack of humility is crucial.
The critique highlights that the ignorant know everything, the knowledgeable only know some things. The arrogant, they lack the crucial what if.
The akabesi omas.
Yes, they lack the humility necessary for critical thought.
They carry what the source calls the pocket god.
The pocket god. I like that.
They've deafened or blinded God to suit their own convenience, which just leads to massive hypocrisy. Their deity isn't the Lord of the worlds anymore. It's the Lord of their faction, their class, their tribe.
So how do we break this cycle of arrogance and misinterpretation? We have to confront the most potent anchor holding societies back.
The prison of ancestors.
Yes, the core of the conflict for every single prophet, from Abraham to Muhammad, wasn't just about serving God. It was about serving God alone.
And that meant abandoning the unquestioned ways of the Atlar, the ancestors.
Every true movement starts with a rejection of the past's corruption.
An uncritical submission to ancestral culture is the straightest path to societal destruction, to the loss of ethical freedom.
The sources give a fascinating modern example of what happens when a society actually rejects that ancestral cult.
Japan.
They know that Japan started World War II with terrible atrocities. But their successful post-war recovery was built on deliberately rejecting the ancestral cult and dismantling the rigid class of clerics, the Ruben.
And the result?
The result was the creation of a functional ethical society. Low crime, a profound sense of civic duty, and that amazing detail the source noted. No traffic noise in Tokyo, no flies.
Wow.
The principle is so profound. Loyalty to the ancestral hearth means carrying the embers, the good wisdom, the real legacy, not the ashes, the outdated customs, the superstitions, the errors.
And when you fail to reject those ashes, you see these ethical breaches that just parallel ancient societal destruction.
Exactly. The source lists these extreme modern corruptions that show the depth of the collapse.
Baby doctors forming exploitation rings. A bank manager embezzling the vault.
A referee betting on the game he's managing. Or a bureaucrat whose signature is on the currency stealing $100 million from the treasury. These are the modern signs of moral degradation that come right before social collapse.
And this collapse, like Noah's flood, it isn't some arbitrary bolt from the blue.
No. Destruction is executed through God's laws. Sunatullah. The laws of nature, physics, sociology. Noah's people were destroyed because they were blind to the flood of immorality rising all around them.
They thought they were safe in a luxury pool.
And the natural consequence of mass immorality is mass destruction. It's a law of social physics.
So the final requirement then is about measure. We have to measure truthfully in all things. It's not just about scales and weights in the market.
Well,
Our character, how we evaluate others, our love, our hatred, it all has to be measured honestly. We're told to act justly, even against those we hate, because this is what's closest to Takva.
and ultimately, we have to return to that foundational principle that organizes this entire deep dive.
Man is not for religion. Religion is for man.
Exactly. A religious system that consumes humanity, that sacrifices people to its own organizational structures, its churches, its mosques, its organizations, is called a cannibal religion. It's fit for the devil, not for God. God's religion repairs and builds and nurtures the human spirit.
Our failure, our wrongdoing, it doesn't hurt the Lord of the world. It hurts us. It hurts our communities, our culture. The core lesson of all the disaster stories, the kisses, is always fundamentally self-reflection.
So we spent time defining the melee, the arrogant elite, and we learned that their superiority complex, their kibir, is just a veiled inferiority complex. If the only true measure of superiority is accountability, Takva, how must we redefine success, authority, and leadership in our modern world, where the melee still judge us by the ashes we carry, rather than the true ember of responsibility? That's the question we hope you take with you.